There's been this transition in HR tech, future of work, from HR tech to work tech, and you mentioned it in relation to what changes are happening moving forward. Can you define the space in your own words right now?
So the simplest way out is that I think about the future of work as a category is there's 3.3 billion workers worldwide, and about 80% of them are generally unhappy or unengaged in their work. So we have a huge problem in work today. To answer your question, Al, we think about HR tech traditionally as a lot of the back office things that happen, right? So payroll, benefits, HR solutions. What we're seeing is this kind of intersection of the back office and the front office of using productivity and collaboration tools. And so I think about work tech today as all the things that someone uses to get their job done, combined with all of the things that an employer needs to provide to make sure an employee can be as good as they can.
In the space of learning is that companies spend a lot of money, sometimes 3% of their revenue, right, on learning content and learning in general. But what happens, and you probably have better stats than I do on learning, because what's happening is that they spend a lot of money acquiring content, but the content itself is not as engaging. So what we are trying to do is just build the concept of engagement through fun games, which is exactly what Kahoot tried to do, and just taking that further. And then we are a secure solution that we are trying to do on top of the existing platforms that exist. So that's how I think the HR tech space is growing, where people are looking at the content and they're trying to make use the content, or the learning specialists are getting their content used by everybody.
Outstanding. So Doug, your thoughts on the future of work and how we're defining the space?
Yeah, so Hermes, now Funtivity, and MindMarker are in a very similar space. We're both addressing the learning space because we believe, as I'm sure you guys do as well, is that the way that learning is happening is broken. Most companies, and we're just looking at the stats, most companies measure how learning is done by completion rate. So you go and you take an employee, you say that we need to have them trained on a new sales methodology. So the way we measure success in most companies is by seeing, hey, have they completed the work? If they completed the work, that doesn't, or the training program, that doesn't mean they're actually learning. And more importantly, that doesn't mean that they're actually driving the KPIs of the business. So what we're doing is we're trying to take a different approach. We're looking at what is the business goal that you need to have? What are the problems that the company has? And how do we then identify the employees that you have, and what are the gaps? If there's a gap, let's train them on that gap so that they can be successful. Whether it's in sales, so that they can close faster, or whether it's in customer support, so they can have more engaging conversations and lower churn rate when they're talking to their customers. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to create, using the power of AI, to help identify the gaps between those employees and the goals of the company. And the employees, not the employees, but their knowledge or their performance, and then be able to tie it with the goals of the company. So I think that things are broken, and it's not broken because people aren't trying hard. People are working really hard, but they're not really working really smart. They're creating these programs, they're delivering the programs. They're not actually delivering against the success that the company wants. And so I think that the power of AI is helping us, and I think a lot of companies in the space, Funtivity, I'm gonna get that. Funtivity is addressing it by creating more engaging content. And we're trying to solve it by starting from the top. What are the business roles and what are the business problems that you're trying to solve? And let's fix those. So that's the conversation that is happening now in this space.
Personally, I'm very bullish in the space, and I wasn't always so. But there are some things that are happening in the market, there's things happening technologically, which are frankly unprecedented, which are taking us to new levels, which for me is really understanding the nature of work. In other words, a lot of decisions were made formerly without really understanding the behaviors of workers, the amount of time spent, and so forth. So now what I'm hearing is that you're going to be leveraging AI to actually identify what people are doing and not doing, and helping fill the gaps moving forward in a proactive way. Is that accurate?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So there's, we're starting, we're starting from day one, from the very foundational component of what are the gaps, and try to create training programs using AI, we take basically foundational models, and then we sprinkle our own know-how, and then expand those models, and then we add the corporate information to have more models that are custom made for the customer. And so that we can create programs that are very engaging and very directed towards the individuals. So that's how we started. I think the next phase is really where we're starting to look at, okay, this is the learner that is in the company, the employee, and this is the gap that they have between the company goals. So let's automatically, right now it's manual, but automatically create that plugin to identify, here's how you're doing, and here's the gaps, and we're gonna deliver content or nuggets of information so that you can actually learn what you need to learn and reinforce it. We can talk about reinforcement in a little bit, but how we make sure that you learn that material and have it stick so that you actually make a difference.
Yeah, so what we are trying to do is, if you think of any content today, right, almost everything that you are using for educating people about the skill gaps that they have, they all end up with some form of a quiz to make sure that you are understanding. But the problem that exists is this content goes through constant change, and also the content itself is very vast. Some companies we have talked to, they have videos about 80 hours on a single topic, and really who is going to go through this 80 hours of video, right?
Yeah.
So what we are doing is just taking all the content that is there, using AI to convert that into gamification. It could be simple quizzes, it could be the scavenger hunt, it can be escape rooms, it can be any kind of content that you can use automatically created so that people can participate, and they're just going and learning content through this gamification, which is basically whatever content you have that content, but you improve the employee experience of content consumption by bringing in gamification through really high cutting edge creation of games that just really piques people's mind on learning and absorbing the content.
As I was describing earlier, one of my lessons at Cornerstone, which is today $1 billion revenue company, is that you can build a really big business with mediocre software. But the learning space, yeah, I mean, one of the things that we always used to pride ourselves on was completion rate. But by the way, most of the learning that was happening in our platform was compliance-based learning. So even with a 50% completion rate, it's not as great as it could or should be. And it was reaction, right? It was always like, take this course and complete it because we need to, have it complete for compliance reasons. So the learning space in general has gone through a huge transformation. We've got a couple of learning companies in our portfolio, and like Al, I think it's a very interesting space. I'm also interested because there's a technical evolution or innovation cycle that's happening, and not just in this space, but broadly across technology, right? So Cornerstone was actually one of the early SaaS vendors. They were started in 1999. Went through a 20-year cycle of this transition to software as a service, and now we're at the beginning stages of this next evolution of AI. And so for me, I am really excited. It's exciting and scary at the same time because I see some valuations and I scratch my head and I don't understand why companies are so overvalued right now. I do, but I don't. At the same time, I was talking to a reporter a couple weeks ago, and I said AI is both overvalued and undervalued at the same time. And what I mean by that is companies are raising a lot of capital, and probably more capital than they need at really high valuations because they can. Conversely, there's going to be a lot of really interesting stuff that's going to be built over the next 3 to 5 years, which hopefully will be somewhat capital constrained, so you can build it companies the traditional way. So I hopefully answered your question now, but to me generally, learning is probably the one area across the WorkTech, HRTech space that can apply AI in a lot of different use cases, right? Whether it's creating content, whether we have a company that's doing skills inferencing. So you basically can look at a person and say, because of where they work, what courses they've taken, what experiences they've had, what career progression they've seen, here's the skills that they have that we think will, and where they should go in their next job. Or for the company, if they have a skills gap, here's where we can progress skills relatively rapidly within the organization. So I think underneath the covers there's a lot of really interesting, beyond just the learning part of it, being able to do career development, skills training, all the things that companies need today to grow and succeed.
AI adoption in these work tech, HR tech companies, absolutely. If I'm an investor, I'm interested in what the barrier to entry is going to be for others. How distinct and hard to replicate is that competitive advantage that they're going to gain with the application of AI? Thoughts?
Oh gosh, I think I'm a smart investor. I don't know, the progression of technology. What I could say from our portfolio today is we just did a poll of our companies. About 75% of them have either deployed some form of AI solution or will be in the next 3 months. We didn't pull in last year. My guess is it was probably 25% last year. And what we've told every company is you need to think about how to apply AI in your company. Now, that said, our best performing companies, one is CopyLeaks, which Sunil threw on the screen. Another is called TechWolf. They've been doing AI in some form or fashion for over 5 years. And through that 5 years, there's been a ton of iteration, tweaking, fine-tuning the models. And I think that's what a lot of companies have to go through, if they haven't already, is really figuring out how to tune the models, how to tweak what they're building, how they're building, and really applying the use cases to it. There's been so much interest in Gen AI, and I get it, right? It's exciting. It was like a whole new belief of what we can do with technology that's happened in the last year. I haven't seen a lot of distinction of how companies are using AI today. At least I haven't sitting in the investor seat. So to me, I'm not sure you can necessarily create a distinct advantage in our world in Gen AI just yet. You can't create that moat, and maybe someone will at some point. But I'm more interested in more the deep side of AI, and more specifically how companies have really fine-tuned their models, how they've iterated what they've learned. And that just takes time. Sales play, everything takes time.
So, Moin, your thoughts there. How are you all going to maintain a distinct, hard to replicate competitive advantage leveraging AI moving forward?
Yeah, I think in our case it's pretty straightforward in my opinion, of course my humble opinion, is that trying to build gamification automatically of content is going to be extremely hard tech for people to replicate, right? So if you really think about creating an escape room, you basically have to understand the content, you understand what the key topics are, what exactly you want to quiz people on, and then if you've got a team of 5 going through this escape room trying to escape the room, they really need to know the content. Of course, they will have access to the content that they want to look at, but they still have to understand and remember where to apply what to get out of it. And imagine creating this virtual scenes out of it. That there are companies, we are talking to Culligan, for example, the water company of all the companies, right? They are looking at training their people on the field, not the field, but people on the floor, how to use the appliances and things like that, right? So imagine that everybody who comes in, they have a huge turnover, and when the turnover is high, how do you keep them engaged? And these are not white-collared people who are sitting in front of documents every day to read through it, but they're the ones who will be enjoying this through gamification. So we think that gamification is a big enough mode that we keep, and with AI, will give us the advantage. And we have been in the gamification space for a very long time, but AI has just made this so fast, so easy, and so so interesting to apply to this space.
And Doug, I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to tee it up this way. I went to used a software called AI-based software called Chat Simple. That was introduced to me by a friend, and I had to identify the website it sourced the content from. And it gave me agency over the content that I was then able to consume and the output that came in. So my propensity to use that tool and advocate for it was way higher than it would otherwise be. So my question to you, Doug, to what degree do we need to use AI to provide agency to work with it?
Yeah, I think one of the key pieces is, I want to answer first the question that you asked, because I think it ties into the how agency is working, because customers or companies, there's 2 kinds of them. There's companies that are interested in AI and companies that don't even care, right? So we put them into those 2 very simple levels, right? So the companies that care about AI get you a seat at their table, but at this stage, and we're working with very large companies, medium-sized companies, and small companies, they're not buying the AI, right? They're buying a solution for their services, right? So they're not, the AI and the fact that you're powered by AI allows you to get to the table. We're still trying to figure out whether they're willing to pay a boost once they know that it's powered by AI. But it certainly gets you a seat at the table, and it makes you competitive, and it can help you win deals, and it can help you with that component. But we don't see companies saying, hey, if there's a line item that's just AI, it's typically not going to survive. At least that's our experience. And what's interesting is the psychology of it, right? Because a lot of customers are saying, I'm worried about, especially the larger customers, I'm worried about what is going to happen with all of my data when I use your AI platform. It's funny that they don't ask the same question if they're using Gmail, right, for their platform, because it's the same AI platform, and it's not the same, but it's a different AI platform, but they're not asking that question. But when you actually say this is going to be an AI solution for you, all of a sudden a lot of red flags come up, and those very difficult discussions happen to say, hey, we were at Charter at Communications in earlier in May. We were with Minerva Secure. We were both there and seeing them, and we pitched them on AI, and they loved it, and everything was great. But when it actually came time to talk about how are we going to be deploying it, and hey, can we charge you an extra $50,000 for this? They're like, no. First, we have to go through committees. We have to figure out whether this is going to be applied, where we can use AI in the company, and but at the same time, we know they're using it. It's just not being called out, right? So I think that's that one piece that is it actually making a difference today? It gets your seat at the table, but it's not actually moving the needle. It's not on its own is moving the needle. So I think the other piece is I think that your question was really how are we going to be able to position ourselves and create a differentiation over time, right? I think there's definitely one differentiation, which is what Cornerstone has done, for example. They already gobbled a lot of customers, and they got customers, and so being able to remove them is, getting them out is, competing with them is a lot harder. So I think definitely being first and being early player in the the AI learning space, and being able to attack it through reinforcement like we're doing is certainly a way to stay in the companies. But I think the other piece is really for continual evolution, right? So those models have to continue to get better, and they have to get better at understanding the human, understanding the processes in the company, and being able to deliver better products. So it really is a race, and we see that it's, how quickly can we develop features that are lasting, that are better than everybody else in the market. However, what we found is that going at the top level, to be able to solve the business problems that you're trying to solve, and yes, hey, you have a business problem that you need to be able to train your physical security guards across the country. Let's come up with a program, or help you come up with a program to solve that problem, right? Or for sales, helping them close faster, or close more deals, or customer support, get to resolution quicker.
From the venture perspective, there are a couple of companies, like the names escape me, that do cybersecurity-based training.
Yeah.
The challenge you find oftentimes is it does require a lot of in-depth knowledge, complex knowledge, so it's hard to build companies that can scale into other categories because it's so specialized. But there are companies that I can think of some names or anything else.
Gamified that segment.
They could have gamified it. They could have just created really unique training courses.
Yeah.
Because the challenge within most learning departments, as both these gentlemen know, is companies traditionally, it will take them months to create a learning course, right? Because you've got to build the curriculum, and then you've got to tailor it to the organization and the words that they use within the org. It can take months, right?
Yeah.
We have one company now that basically does text-based learning, and they can use AI to create the courses. Now, you can create a course on anti-sexual harassment, because that's pretty generic, right? You can't create a text-based course on cybersecurity in a lot of cases because it is so specialized. But there are companies that do that.
So I think if you were to take just learning in general, right, there is learning that you have to do HR learning, but there's compliance, right, that everybody has to go through once a year. But then there is a bunch of learning that is very specific to the industry, to the company, to the vertical, to making sure that what they're working on is helping them become better at the company. So if you take engineering, for example, right, you can think of doing architecture review. So our product person is talking about everything that's there, or a salesperson understanding what are the different types of incentives / discounts you can get. Everything is very different, and somebody has codified, somebody has put it in presentation, somebody has given a video talk about it. So all of that is there. There's a lot of knowledge. It's not necessarily in the learning system. It is there in your wikis. It's there in your content anywhere. So the thing is, how do you make that easily digestible? Nobody's going to go through every single content all the time. It's how do you get it to people's hand, into their head quickly.
I mean, typically you'll have, all the compliance is usually done by HR. And you'll have companies start working with HR, their L&D team, to actually create programs for sales or for operations on the floor, what have you. But typically they find that it takes too long. So what they'll end up doing is they create their own learning department group inside sales or inside field ops or inside those organizations. And so in healthcare, if you guys are in that space, it's the same thing there. We work with Cigna and a few other companies, and they also have it spread throughout the organization. They do have a central learning team, but then there's many other teams that are actually doing.
So with the introduction of AI, historically HR, CLO, that would pretty much be it, correct me if I'm wrong. Now you have IT involved, you have potentially operations, legal. What's the buying experience like? Is it more cumbersome now? Is it as efficient? Thoughts there?
So I think what we are seeing is that if you are talking to so first and foremost, you're selling a solution, right? You're not selling AI, right? You're saying how is the job that you're doing is going to become easier, right? If you are hitting that, then you have the right persona that's talking to you, and it's their job to make sure that the content that they're responsible for is being consumed, then you've got the right person. But every single time you do that, and you have to guarantee in our case that the content that they have is not leaving their premises, then IT does get involved. So in some sense, although we are not creating content, we are parsing their content. So it does become important to make sure that the content is staying within the premises. And the more we can guarantee that, and we are SOC 2 type 2 compliant. So just say doing a few things, which takes you maybe a year to get the certification, and getting to that stage just opens up the door for you. So just making sure that you are doing all the right things. I mean, we are going to get compliance, app compliance from Microsoft very soon. We are in the process. We'll be getting a blue check mark against our app when you go to Microsoft. So doing those things actually makes it very easy to sell, right? And then the process is already nailed to make sure that you're secure and you have taken all the necessary precautions. So the buying experience does become longer, but you can do a lot of these steps beforehand to make that easier.
That's smart. That's smart. Can you define, not only did you invest internationally, you have a variety of sectors.
Yes.
And so tech wolf, talent intelligence, you got people, you got all kinds of, can you define it in your own words and start to wrap up?
So the way we invest is really threefold. We look at companies as category disruptors. So that's kind of bucket number one. So can they come in and disrupt the incumbent? Can they come in and disrupt Workday or ADP or LinkedIn? So that's kind of bucket one, is the category disruptors. Category two is the category creators. So are you creating a whole new category that doesn't exist today? And that's category number two. We have a number of companies in that portfolio. Category number three is actually an interesting one. It's more of a kind of category augmentation. So it could be, can it attach to Workday? Can it attach to Cornerstone? But we have to be compelled that these kind of subcategories can be very, very large. We think in a lot of cases they can be. But that's generally the way we think about venture investing is, are you disrupting, are you creating, or are you augmenting? And we think in all three of those categories, to Sunil's point earlier, we think similarly, can this be a $100 million revenue company? In all three categories, we think you can build $100 million revenue companies using that kind of philosophy.
Outstanding, thank you. Ron, closing comment.
I think the world of AI is really hot, really big, and the changes that have happened in the space of AI have been so rapid and dramatic in the last 6 to 8 months. It's mind-boggling, and we're just beginning to scratch the surface of it, and we are coming up with ideas. Who knows, 6 months down the road, you'll come up with new ideas on what you can do. I mean, Stable Diffusion completely changed the way we thought about how we do gamification, right? It's not just ChatGPT, it's Stable Diffusion. And then the next thing that comes out, right, that videos being created. So there are a lot of things that can happen in a matter of days. Like, we're not over years, but or even months. It's like in days. Like every day, there's something new coming out. So the opportunities are just so fabulous that we are very excited about what we can do at Fiverr.
Doug, bring us home.
So last comment is Gen AI and as any other technology just accelerate and they're big and there's so much work to do. We can't do it by ourselves. We know that we want to work with partners that actually help us innovate and be able to grow. So anybody that's here, and I know we've been talking, but for us to be able to talk, there's a lot of work that if we can partner together with companies that are in a similar space, we can actually bring a solution together as more. So looking for partners to test out some of the technology that we're building out, and for us to be able to see how we can collaborate and plug in with other tools in the HR space.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. Appreciate
Thank you.
it.